The Harley Jar! I felt like some kind of pervert stalking my wife. It depressed me that I had to resort to such measures, but it had to end someday. For the past few weeks, I knew something was going on. I didn't want it to be true. I didn't want to find out, but I had to. Sherry, who we'd been together for 8 years, was showing all the signs of infidelity. All these little things that never added up to anything serious, but continued to eat away at me. I checked the obvious things like phone calls and emails and found nothing. Although we didn't have children, Sherry wanted to be a homebody. She spends most of her time making stained glass and window ornaments. She seemed happy, and I didn't mind that. I used my law degree to open a small law office in a shopping center. I wasn't a big lawyer for exotic court cases, but just handled things like wills, title transfers, no-fault divorces, and other mundane legal matters. The most exciting aspect of my profession was providing bail bond services to one of the local motorcycle clubs. I didn't post bail, but simply worked between the bail bond company and the club to make sure everything went well. On those rare occasions when legal representation was needed, I enlisted the help of a friend of mine who handled criminal cases. In return, he sent me a lot of small assignments. It was a win-win for everyone. Anyway, today Sherry informed me that she was going shopping with her friend Mary Jane and asked if I wanted her to buy something for me while she was gone. For some reason, I decided that today was the day I would either make an idiot of myself or find out something I didn't want to know. So here I sit. Sherry pulled up to her friend Mary Jane's house and went inside. About a half hour later, Mary Jane came out of the house alone, got into Sherry's car, and drove down the street. I had a GPS tracker in my car, so I didn't follow her. About 20 minutes later, a guy on a brand new Harley Davidson touring motorcycle pulled up to the house. He was dressed like a biker, but something about him was off. He walked right into the house without knocking. I took one clear picture before he came in. I waited about 10 minutes and got some good shots of the bike and remembered the license plate well. Half an hour later, I was at Parkview Plaza looking for Mary Jane. On the way to the mall, I ran the license plate. Mary Jane was relaxing as best she could on one of those stupid plastic chairs in the restaurant patio. She jumped a little when I sat down next to her with my coffee. "John, you scared me. What are you doing here?" I tried to get comfortable, which was nearly impossible. I didn't answer her. I just sat there and sipped my coffee. It was black and hot. I've never been able to come to grips with all these new fancy drinks they call coffee. She was getting nervous. I laughed to myself as I watched her fidget in her chair, trying to figure out how she could handle the situation. I decided to let her off the hook. "Relax, Mary Jane. I know where she is. I know who she's with, and I know what she's doing. I don't care anymore." She covered her face with her hands. "Oh, shit." I waited for a follow-up, but nothing came. I expected to hear a string of platitudes. "Tell her to stay at your house. I'll send all her stuff over later. Any questions?" As I left, she just shook her head. The Meat Pit started out as a casual restaurant, but eventually turned into a hardcore biker bar that happened to serve great brisket. The place couldn't really be called family-friendly. They actually had a pretty good straight business on the weekends, but weeknights were pretty rough. As soon as I crossed the threshold, Hector Turpin squeezed my cold, long neck in his hand. "Welcome to our home, counselor. We rarely see you." It was midday, but at least 20 members were enjoying the atmosphere. "Are we in some kind of trouble, counselor?" "No. You guys are fine, although I do have a bit of a dilemma." Hector and I had a small conversation at the round table with a few other members. Terry Evans seemed to be a regular visitor to Pit End. He was one of those who wanted to be part of the team, but felt they could fit in. They immediately recognized the bike and his picture. Smiling broadly, Hector told me that everything would be taken care of. I didn't want to know anything else. It was still fairly light, so I headed home. An hour later, all of Sherry's clothes and personal belongings were neatly packed into black garbage bags. I was amazed that I was able to load it all into the car. If she needed any furniture or appliances, she would have to contact me later. Her car was parked in front of Mary Jane's house, but she never left the house. I put all the bags on the porch and quietly left. I could see Mary Jane watching me from the window. Sherry never called. No messages, no emails, no apology. I had to make another trip to deliver all her stained glass hobby supplies. I just put them out on the porch again. I just finalized the divorce and filed the papers with her. She signed all the papers while the executor waited. Did she have any remorse? I'll never know. Was there regret? I'll never know. Did I care? Hell no! I got drunk that weekend. Monday morning, I arrived at work and discovered there had been a break-in. Nothing had been stolen, but there was a large pickle jar filled with nuts and bolts on my desk. I immediately grabbed my phone. Hector, lunch at the Red Lobster noon. My treat. Of course, I had to leave a message. There's no way he could have gotten up that early. He ordered the fish course and had 2 cheddar cookies. Do you want to know, my friend, or would you prefer I keep you in the dark? I'm fine, Hector. Tell me everything in detail. Dude showed up around 4:00. 2 guys got to talking to him and invited him to shoot an 8. He was excited because he'd never been invited or even noticed before. We declined dessert, but ordered coffee. My boss, Butterball, took 2 potential customers outside, gave them a toolbox, and told them to completely disassemble his bike. All the nuts, bolts, and screws had to be put in a pickle jar. To simplify the task, they didn't have to disassemble the engine or transmission. It took them almost 3 hours to do this. When they were done, they brought out a jar of parts. They poured us more coffee. The guys abruptly stopped playing figure 8 and left. Butterball's old lady, Kiki, walked over to Evans and whispered something in his ear. He looked around and slowly headed for the door. He took one look at the pile of parts where his motorcycle used to be and left. The last thing we saw was him getting into a cab. So now, I'm the proud owner of a dismantled Harley motorcycle? Hector had to suppress a laugh. Well, sort of. Unfortunately, by the next morning, almost all the other parts were gone. What did she say to him? I'm not sure, but I think your wife's name was mentioned. The rest of the week went as usual. I filed the divorce papers, and now all I had to do was wait. 90 days is a long time. I still hadn't talked to Sherry. I missed the companionship, but couldn't accept the alternative. Just to kill time, I called Monsanto Automotive, the company where Terry Evans worked. He no longer worked there and left no forwarding address. A friend in local law enforcement said no report had been filed for damage to the motorcycle. 2 weeks later, I ran into Mary Jane again at the mall. It wasn't planned, just a chance encounter. She was sitting in the restaurant patio having a cup of coffee. I don't know why, but she looked a little depressed. Do you mind if I join you? I didn't bother to shock her this time. She just smiled and nodded. We were silent for a few minutes. Finally, she sighed quietly. John, I'm sorry I ruined your marriage. You didn't do that. She did. But I helped her. I did the best I could for her. She asked me for help, and I couldn't say no. She was my only friend. We sat in silence for a few more minutes. Is she with him now? No. She's back in Frackville with her parents. He just disappeared. No word, no text, no email. One day he was here, the next day he was gone. Was she upset? She was upset about losing you, but not about him. I guess my next question should be, why did she do it? But you know I don't want to know. Thank you for your time, Mary Jane. I think I saw a little tear as I was leaving. It was a boring day at the office. My divorce was still 2 weeks away. I was trying to guess how many nuts, bolts, and screws were actually in the pickle jar. I couldn't help but wonder what Kiki had whispered in that guy's ear. I guess I'll never know. The end.